After the Southlands officially transformed into Mordor, the Lord of the Rings of Power reveals who really comes up with the name. Joseph Maul as Adar and Mordor in the Rings of Power. The Lord of the Rings of Power reveals exactly who gave Mordor its name, but it's not necessarily who you think. Amazon's The Rings of Power Season 1 reveals the untold origin of Mordor. Originally known as the Southlands, Middle-earth's volcanic south was under Morgoth's control during the First Age. Once the War of Wrath ended, the Southlanders were watched carefully by a nearby elf garrison, but some remained loyal to darkness. Commander Adar then hatched a plot to turn the area into an orc haven by blackening the Southland's sky. And that scheme came to fruition in the Rings of Power Episode 6 when Waldreg plugged his black sword into the Ephel-Juath, triggering a cascade that ran through a tunnel system dug by Adar's orcs and activating Mount Doom. The Rings of Power Episode 7 comes to the business of naming this newly scorched land. Waldreg proclaims Adar Lord of the Southlands. But the new ruler takes exception, claiming the Southlands no longer exists. Asked what the realm should be called instead, Adar doesn't reply, but he does look toward the black plume emanating from Mount Doom and smile knowingly. An on-screen Southlands text tag then transitions to Mordor, heavily implying Adar is responsible for picking Mordor's moniker. This makes sense, since the word actually derives from the Elven tongue rather than Sauron's usual black speech, and Adar has already shown a lingering attachment to his old customs. Why Galadriel names Mordor first in the Rings of Power. Adar might officially christen Mordor in the Rings of Power Episode 7, but the name doesn't strictly start with him. Earlier in the Eye, Galadriel guides Theo through the decimated landscape. When the displaced young Southlander asks why orcs would wreak such devastation, his elf companion replies, to make this their home, their shadow land. Had Galadriel chosen to speak in her native Sindarin language in this scene, she might have uttered the word Mordor here, which translates to dark lands in Sindarin. Mordor also means shadow in Quenya, making Mordor a pretty close match for Shadow Land. It's actually Galadriel, therefore, who coins the Southlands' new title in the Rings of Power. Adar clearly just has the same idea. Did the Rings of Power overcook its Mordor twist? The very final shot in the Rings of Power Episode 7 is the aforementioned text transition from Southlands to Mordor. Its placement as the episode's closing stinger suggests viewers perhaps weren't supposed to make the connection between the Southlands and Mordor until after witnessing the destruction caused by Adar's volcano eruption. In truth, the Southlands Mordor theories began before the Rings of Power's very first episode even premiered, thanks largely to a map posted on social media pre-release. By the end of Episode 6, the secret was well and truly out. And even the Rings of Power's showrunners ended up acknowledging the Southlands as Mordor after Mount Doom went up in flames. As a result, the Rings of Power Episode 7's final scene doesn't quite pack the punch it was surely intended to have, wasting a final scene cliffhanger. When the Southlands text line shifts to Mordor, viewers were probably supposed to have a light bulb moment. In practice, it's a bit like putting a drum roll before revealing Aragorn's secret royal lineage and expecting everyone to be amazed.